Hey friend, how you going? My name is Joe Bekmutsky and welcome to Simplify Cancer podcast. I'm really excited about the podcast you're gonna hear today. It's an interview with Mike Craycraft, who is the head of Testicular Cancer Society and a fantastic guy. I'm sure you're gonna get a lot out of it. So let's get into it. Mike, thank you so much for doing this. I've been really looking forward to it. Mike, can you please tell me about yourself?
Sure. My name is Mike Craycraft. I'm a clinical pharmacist by trade and also a testicular cancer survivor. I was diagnosed in 2006 and then founded the Testicular Cancer Society after my diagnosis, just because there weren't a whole bunch of resources available back then. So and I felt like with my survivor experience and healthcare knowledge, perhaps I could help make a difference.
Thanks, Mike. And I know that you waited for over 7 months from when you first felt a lump in your testicle until you went to the doctor. What was the time like? What was going through your head?
It was like a vicious cycle. So I would actually get hot flashes at night, and so my scrotum would get looser, and I could feel the lump, and then I'd check myself. I think I'm going to call the doctor in the morning, and I check myself in the shower and I wouldn't feel it. And then I'd go to work and I wouldn't remember to call until it was noon and the doctor's office was closed. So I think, okay, well, after lunch I'll call. And then I wouldn't remember again till 6 o'clock at night when the doctor's office was called. And it just became this vicious cycle of just delaying. I had a whole bunch of things going on, obviously with the holidays, with Christmas, with New Year's, my dad's birthday. So I kept thinking, okay, well, after this, I'll go to the doctor. I really don't want to come home for Christmas and say, Merry Christmas, your son has cancer.
Yeah.
So the next thing I know, it was pretty quick that I realized that my delay probably meant that I had metastatic disease, and I convinced myself that I would die as a young man, to the point that I even threw my own going away party. I went back home for our Thanksgiving holiday here in the U.S. and asked a friend what bar I could have. I'm going to rent it out and buy all the drinks, and figured in a couple of months my friends would realize that I had cancer and was dying. So it was quite a hellish period for those 7 months, just not sharing with anybody, not friends, family, doctor, just keeping quiet and literally living like I was dying.
Oh, horrible. I mean, it just drives you crazy, doesn't it?
It's a very lonely period, yeah. I'm probably one of the few people that when the doctor said you have cancer, felt some kind of relief. Most of the people are shocked, and I was just like, okay, well, I've known this. So you're saying I'm going to live? Okay, well, this is great. Can I get some money back? Because I just blew a whole bunch of money in the last 7 months. And by the way, I didn't get any back, so don't do what I did.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're probably one of the very few people to say that. Yeah, but I know that it can play, your mind just plays tricks on you. I know that when I was, as you obviously know, I also had testicular cancer. And when I was in the shower and I reached down and I found it, I think the fact that really helped me was that I'm a complete hypochondriac. So the next thing I did the next day was run to the doctor immediately because I was 100% convinced that this was cancer. But yeah, I know what you mean about you touch it the next day and it's not there. And you start doubting yourself. It's like your mind starts playing all these crazy games on you.
Yeah. It just, it seemed like it just was a vicious cycle. I mean, some of it was fear, some of it was denial. But the biggest aspect then, a whole churning in the cycle, was really not wanting to upset others. I knew I was coming home for Thanksgiving and my friends are getting married. How can I ruin their wedding by telling everyone that I think I have cancer? How can I do it at Christmas or New Year's and my dad's 60th birthday in January? It just kept perpetuating until finally I had a guy's trip to Costa Rica to go surfing, and I figured I wanted to learn how to surf, and if I was going to die and people thought I was a surfer, maybe I'd be cooler. So that was my last trip, and I said, okay, before I even leave, I'm booking an appointment for 2 days after I get back. So I had to go once I got back from that trip. But that was June, and it had started in October. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and once you found out that you had cancer, so how did you break the news to your friends, your family? What was that like?
Well, at first, before my orchiectomy, before the testicle was removed and we knew 100% it was cancer, I still kind of kept it quiet. I said something to my parents. I debated saying something to my sister, and my dad convinced me I should, because if I didn't, maybe she'd think I was hiding something from her. And then literally right when I went in and the doctor first said I had cancer, I came back the next day, and some friends of mine were playing music on stage, and I ended up jumping up on stage and making some just ridiculous comment about I'm pulling a Lance Armstrong, and if anyone finds my testicle in the sand, to bring it back to me. And no one even got what I said, except for one friend who immediately started crying, knowing that I was saying that I had cancer. Once the pathology came back, then it was, open season. I didn't mind who knew or anything else. I just didn't want to be that guy maybe that had a testicle removed and it came back normal. Looking back, even then, who cares? That's great news. Yep. Hey, you lost a testicle. Great news. You don't have cancer. But yeah, once I got the official news, it pretty much, the floodgates opened.
And how did people react? Like, were they supportive? Were they shocked? What was it like?
Well, I actually have a funny story for you. So I guess I was being annoying one evening, and my one friend drew a stick figure with these round glasses on. I had these round glasses, and they used to call me Smithers from the Simpsons TV show. And so it was a stick figure of me with tire tracks running across it, and on the top it said "Kill Smithers." And so they all thought it was funny. I didn't know anything about it, and they got these T-shirts printed up, not knowing that. Next thing I know, I say I have cancer, and now they don't know what to do with the T-shirts. They ended up hilarious. They ended up all putting them on and showing up to the beach bar one night, or one day actually, and surprising me. So it was all literally fun and games after that. My parents had traveled to Maine and came back right after my diagnosis with a T-shirt of some squirrels on a branch, and a nut had fallen off, and there was a big pile of nuts on the branch, and it said it's all fun and games. Someone loses a nut, and my mom gives it to me and asks, "Is this too soon?" It's like, no. That's fantastic. So, besides the humor, everybody was, incredibly, helpful, accepting, all those kind of things. I had friends' house that I stayed at for 6 weeks that year, because I would come back home to Cincinnati and stay with them. So people just bent over backwards really to help.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And is there anything, Mike, like in hindsight, that you would have done differently? I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is, waiting all this time. I mean, that must have been excruciating.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. I mean, looking back in retrospect, I'm glad I did it, because I did have an experience that was unlike anyone else. But I also somehow lucked out and was still stage 1, which is pretty amazing. Really looking back, using some common sense, no, I should have gone to the doctor right away in October when I first felt a lump, and really saved myself the mental beat down that I gave to myself. But during that process, I also kind of accepted the fact that I was going to die. I didn't want to die, but I accepted it. And in my mind, it was just as real as anybody with a terminal diagnosis. Yep. I went through that process. And when I was going through it, I kept thinking, I've had a pretty incredible life. Of course, people have had much better lives than I have, but other people haven't. And when I was trying to figure out why is my life so great, it really came down to it's the people I know and the friends I've met. It's nothing spectacular about me. And so it just really gave me a much grander perspective on life and what was important to me. So everything worked out fine. But if I wouldn't have beat myself up for the 7 months, that would have helped too.
Absolutely. So now that, that you've talked about that, back then it's really changed your perspective in terms of really appreciating, like you said, the friends, the friends you met and the people that you have in your life. Has that been any different now, all these years later, now that you look back on it, as I guess, has your perspective shifted?
I don't know that my perspective has shifted that much. I do talk about every now and again. I don't share it very often with people, but when I was first diagnosed, I said, well, I'm going to go live my life every day. And doing what I do, running a nonprofit organization. It's not a woe is me, but it's, I look up and I'm like, I'm not really living my life every day. When I'm sitting behind a computer at, 10, 12, 14 hours a day, that's not exactly a good work-life balance, I guess. So in that aspect, I probably need to improve on that balance nowadays.
But what you're doing now is really amazing, because all of your nonprofit work helps so many people, and I think it's a good time to talk about the fact that you founded the Testicular Cancer Forum, and you've been maintaining it for was it 10 years now?
Well, I didn't actually found it. It actually was started by a survivor and his buddy years ago. I actually joined the forums in 2008, and part of the Testicular Cancer Society was we would tell people to go to the tc-cancer.com forums, because that's where all the guys were. There was no reason for us to have something with our name on it to try to reinvent the wheel when everybody was already going there. And so we were really huge advocates for that. And about 5 years ago, the forums were basically to the point where they're going to be shut down. They'd had some technical difficulties, and the people that started it, had put a decade in, basically. Yep. And so they came to us, and I saw the value in it. I would see guys come back years later on a questionable checkup, or a second cancer, or a relapse, or a problem with hormone replacement therapy, or fertility questions. And I wanted to make sure that the legacy of the forums were there, for those people, in all that gathered knowledge, and as well as new people coming. So we took them over about 5 years ago. So I've been on them for 10 years now, but really, only been the main oversight for about the last 5 years.
That's so amazing, Mike, because I know that it helped me so much when I was looking for support, when I was looking for answers, to find people who are going through what you are going through. I mean, it's just amazing. So thank you so much. And I guess I want to ask that, what is your main motivation for, I guess, not only keeping the forums going, but also being so active? I mean, you log in almost every day, and you post and you support people through it. How do you keep it going?
I guess my goal overall was always to help the next me. And so I know how I was in 2006. I know how the forums helped me. So, if I can help the next guy in a little ways, then it's worth it. It gives me pleasure to be able to do that. I also feel like I said before, I'm in a unique position where, I have the healthcare knowledge where, I can reach out to the top experts in the world and have a conversation with them that's so in depth that it would flabbergast people. And then I can turn around and, being a pharmacist, be able to communicate back down to, the person's level that was just diagnosed, which not a lot of healthcare professionals, have that ability, to really relate to the public per se, with the information, and also with the feelings, and sometimes it gets difficult. Sometimes you lose some empathy along the way, but, overall, no, you stop for a second and think, yeah, this person is in my exact shoes that I was. I remember how that feels. Taking 2 minutes to reply to them, really can help make a difference.
Yeah, and that is another thing that I really noticed on the forums, is that everyone is so supportive. Even if the same questions, from guys come up, because people go through the same things. People like you, like so many others, just respond in such a positive way, as if it's the first time anyone is posting in there. I think that is so fantastic. And I mean, I can't encourage people, any more than I'm trying to do now. What I want to encourage people is to always go to forums like the Testicular Cancer Forum, because I think you get so much incredible value and support out of it.
Nowadays there's a lot of testicular cancer groups on Facebook, which is great. You can get almost instantaneous reaction. The forums sometimes are a little slow as far as developing the responses. But what I think is really key about the forums is two things. One, they're completely anonymous. You pick your own username. And we've had situations where there's been people on there that can't use their real name or don't want to use the real name, where Facebook, you kind of have to in these Facebook groups. And secondly, it's searchable and it's permanent, where, Facebook, if someone posted 6 months ago, it's going to take you an hour and a half to scroll back down and find that information. So the forums kind of are an older technology, but I think they really are invaluable for what they are. I mean, it's a huge collection of experience and knowledge, from real life, and that's what people need.
Absolutely. And I think that the more resources that you have at your disposal, the better. I mean, I think it's, if I was talking to someone today who found out that they had cancer, I would say use every tool you can at your disposal to help yourself. You read books, go to forums. You mentioned Facebook groups. I'm sure there's other resources out there. I think people should use whatever they can, shouldn't they?
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of people willing to help that have been there before. I think the forums are really good because I think there's a high level of education and experience on there. Again, not belittling Facebook groups at all, but I've been on there and seen some responses, and it's just worrisome at some point where when I'm going through the forums, I mean, I see every post. I don't always comment, because if I comment on every post, then it's Mike's forums, not the Testicular Cancer Forum. So, I don't always interject. I certainly do if I see something that appears to be misinformation, but it's very rare when going through these forums that I even see that.
Yeah, I guess this is in the forums because there's just been people who've been around for a while now, and a mix with new people. It just has much more of a community feel there.
Well, and I think it's even kind of a self-learning process, where if there's a post and there's 5 responses, on Facebook, there might be 15 responses, and 6 of them or 10 of them are just out there. They're talking about one type of testicular cancer when the person has a different one, or, they just don't totally have the grasp of knowledge that I think the people on the forums, because they've been there for a while, and because it's less to absorb and they're absorbing good information back, I just think the quality is much higher.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say about I definitely believe that it really helped me to be really in the know about what's going on at every stage of the way. Yes, it was great to have, for example, my urologist and then my oncologist, but it really helped me to combine that with also first-hand experience of people like yourself on the forums, who really helped me learn so much more, all of this, additional information as well as perspective. So what do you think about that, about people getting that mix of, I guess, specialist knowledge, but also real life first-hand experience of people who went down that road before?
I think they go hand in hand. When you're going through the diagnostic process, and you're trying to get staged, having someone be able to say to you, okay, well, the biggest key of information right now is a CT scan. And then after that, it's going to be your tumor markers. And then it's going to come down to what the pathology actually says. And also being able to say at the same time, your pathology shouldn't take any more than 3 days. And your CT scan really should be ready tomorrow. You can go get the information yourself, because it's an anxious hurry up and wait period. You're rushing through everything, and then you're waiting for those results to come back, which can create an incredible amount of anxiety. And especially if you don't have a physician that's on top of things and wants to move quickly for you, they'll say, okay, go get a CT scan, see me in a week. Go do this, see me in a week. And it's like, no, let's see you 2 days from now. Let's hurry this up. Yeah. At least call and let me know what the information is, so I'm not sitting here fretting.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what, Mike? I remember, in one of your posts when you were talking about driving your friend to her cancer treatments. I think 2 hours each way. Did you find it emotionally rewarding? Was it tiring? Was it draining? What was that like?
No. So it was a friend of mine who relapsed with brain cancer. And actually, it was one of the biggest pleasures of my life. She ended up passing away. But to be able to take her to her physical therapy or to her radiation treatments was incredibly rewarding. As I mentioned, I kind of put myself through that process of making peace with my life. And, I feel like I was very well able to help her along the way as well. So it's one of the best things I've ever done. A 2-hour drive each way was nothing really.
That's great, Mike. And I also remember that there was like this amazing post of someone. I think they were going through stage 2 or stage 3 of testicular cancer, and they were ready to give up. And the doctor said that it was going to be too difficult to operate. And I remember that you recommended a specialist in a different city to get a second opinion. And that person followed your advice and they went through with the operation. And I remember that person being completely over the moon. Like that's really incredible, Mike. Like, how does that make you feel, like being able to make such a difference to someone's life?
It was pretty exciting when he sent the response back that and kind of filled us in on what was going on. Yeah, I guess he originally asked his oncologist to go to one of the 2 physicians that I recommended. One I've met actually, I believe both I've met in person, but one I'm much more social with. But I knew that they knew their stuff, and I guess his physician did or didn't. I don't know. He had a local surgeon. The surgeon wasn't able to remove all the cancer in his abdomen and sent him home to die. And he decided that, well, I have nothing to lose. I'm just going to contact the doctor Mike said. And within 2 weeks, he was in the doctor's office, saw that doctor's surgeon who was able to remove 100% of the cancer, and he was cured. He was amazed that the doctor, that the specialist I mentioned, was 700 kilometers away, which for a guy in the U.S., you're probably wondering why I say kilometers. Well, it's because the patient was in Australia. And I recommended either one doctor in Melbourne or another doctor in Sydney. So to be able to do that literally from the other side of the world really was exciting for me. Lucky with like the American Society of Clinical Oncology that I've been able to meet these physicians at the annual meeting. There's also what's called G3 of the Global Germ Cell Group. And these physicians are part of that. Did I get the pleasure of going to those meetings as well? So it just all worked out, in an absolutely fantabulous way.
Fantabulous. That really is a perfect way to describe it, Mike. Absolutely. Mike, I know that sometimes people on the forum have clear false alarms. Does this annoy you, or do you believe that the forum is for everyone, not just for people who are really sick?
No, I mean, the key is early detection in treatment. So, if someone comes in and they feel a lump and, it really, from whatever they're describing, is a pimple on the scrotum and not a testicular cancer, they're still scared. They're still worried. We can't really tell them that it's a pimple on their scrotum and not testicular cancer. But certainly being able to try to guide them in to get to a doctor, to get checked out, to hopefully get a scrotal ultrasound is key. There's also really a healthcare anxiety. You say hypochondriac. There is a huge anxiety. And some people it takes a lot of convincing to. Some people, their question's been answered, 15 times already this year and they didn't search through. But regardless, it's okay. They have a question, they need an answer. If they would rather, type it in and get an answer from everybody, that's great. It's not just for those diagnosed, and it's usually for the caregivers as well. As you see, there's so many women that are on the forums. It really is for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of anxiety, I know that one thing that comes up for me personally is the fear of cancer coming back. Did that happen to you? And if so, like, what would you recommend to someone dealing with cancer in terms of how they can deal with it in a better way?
Well, I don't think the fear of it coming back ever really goes away. I think it gets easier with time. I know from my 3-year checkup, which is a pretty big one for seminoma, I was reading through my CT results. I would always get my results before I went back into my doctor, so I would know what questions to ask instead of being shocked by what I was told. And I was reading through, it said interval increase in size is, and then it skipped down to the next line, not seen. And from the end of one line to the beginning of the next, I about crap myself, thinking interval is seen, instead of is not seen. I worked with the radiologist, so I even made fun of him and said, listen, you got to change your dictation so it all falls on one line. This is, this is too nerve wracking. Really, I think as someone that's diagnosed, having a realistic expectation of what your risk of relapse is, I think is important. Having knowledge of that, I think a lot of guys don't. They don't know what the risk of relapse is. It's stage 1 disease, or after chemotherapy, or after chemo and RPL&D, what the odds of it coming back in the second testicle are. They get a headache and they think, oh my gosh, it's gone to my brain, which would be extremely rare, to occur without some disease in the abdomen and lungs. So I think that is key. And I think really for stage 1 disease, for example, taking a look at the numbers and seeing that greater than 99% of guys live for 15 years, survival rate. I mean, it's basically almost 100% cure. And if you look at the guys that actually had stage 1 testicular cancer that pass away, as many pass away from alcohol as they do from testicular cancer and the treatment. Many, many more pass away from other cancers, or cardiovascular disease or lung disease. So our experience tells us the biggest challenge that we've had is our testicular cancer diagnosis. And I always kind of look at it as, what is the next big challenge I'm going to face? Could this be the biggest challenge of my life so far? The testicular cancer, I've always thought that. 5 months after my diagnosis, I got dengue fever. My odds of dying acutely from dengue fever were much higher than dying acutely of testicular cancer.
Wow.
I think putting in a perspective helps a little bit, knowing that they call it conditional survival. For every 2 years you live, your odds of living the next 2 years go up, and no matter what the stage is. I just think making sure you have a perspective is really key. And then if there's anxieties, what can be done about it? Is it something that's affecting your daily activities? Then you probably need to go talk to someone. There's also the new program that came out of Australia, the e-tc.org, that's helping guys kind of, readjust to life after diagnosis. That's something that they can try.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think that the biggest thing is to realize that some things are normal. So, a lot of guys are, I think, can have anxiety because they have peripheral neuropathy, and it's a constant reminder that they've had cancer. But when they realize that, just about everybody else that's received chemotherapy has that as well, it's normal. I think that can put the mind at ease a little bit as well.
Yeah, and I guess probably for yourself, I know that it does for me. Going to the forum and seeing other people, I guess that helps put things into perspective as well, right?
Yeah, it certainly does. Seeing that you're not the only one that's having these fears is big. What's really kind of amazing to me right now is that the most recent research looking at survivorship shows that really the fear of infertility or being able to be a father is just as high and as severe as the fear of recurrence.
Wow.
Which is flabbergasting, because you would think, okay, well, just go to a fertility doctor and check your sperm count, a year or two after chemotherapy, and at least put your mind at ease or confirm it. Yep. That's a lot simpler than, getting over the fear of recurrence. But it's amazing that those are the two biggest things that are really affecting survivorship as far as, really a fear and anxiety standpoint.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. I didn't know that. So, Mike, also, what is your perspective on living a healthy lifestyle? Like, what would you recommend in terms of keeping in a good shape physically, mentally? Is it a diet? Is it exercise? What would you say?
Well, as I mentioned before, testicular cancer survivors have a higher risk of cardiovascular disease. They have a higher risk of metabolic syndrome. Certainly leading a healthy lifestyle is never a bad idea. Is it in the long run going to make a difference with your cancer coming back? No. Is it going to keep you from passing away from complications, or, like I said, cardiovascular disease? Yeah, certainly. I think there are also limits to it. There was a great book actually written by Matthew Carr out of Australia called Battle Scars. If you haven't read it, take a read. It's pretty good. But in it, he was getting up every morning. He was big into Eastern medicine, I guess it is, and martial arts, for lack of a better term. And he was getting up every morning and drinking his own urine. And then when his cancer relapsed, he kind of slapped himself in the face thinking, did I think drinking my own urine every morning was gonna keep my cancer away? What was I thinking? So I do say that
that's a great story.
There's certain limits to what you want to do, but certainly having a reasonable diet and exercise, I think, is a good idea.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. And
but one last thing to add, people always talk about like antioxidants, and so one of the things you have to look at, especially when you're on chemotherapy, is people want to load up on all these antioxidants, go to the nutrition store and get everything they possibly can. Well, the problem is that the chemotherapy creates free radicals to kill the cancer cells. So when you do anything too much, I guess, in a zealot pathway, I always kind of caution, maybe turn it back in a little bit.
Yep. Cool. Thanks, Mike. And if you had a minute with someone who recently was diagnosed with some type of cancer, what would you tell them?
Well, I guess it depends on the type of cancer. I think overall is relax, take a deep breath, get some perspective and knowledge, because I think anxiety and maybe hysteria, for lack of a better word, can take over and really cripple you without kind of more critically thinking about what you're facing. And I don't mean to be slight at all, but I heard one time that cancer has a 50% mortality rate. Well, yeah, overall. The good news is that 50% of you are going to die of something else. So, not to be too flippant, but that kind of puts things into perspective. Now, obviously, each individual case is going to be different, but really taking a breath, figuring out what you're facing, and figuring out where you're going to get the best care. I think that's really the biggest thing. Some people, unfortunately, I have to talk to and have to explain, you're probably going to be better off getting things in order. This doesn't look real good. There doesn't really seem to be any options, and you've talked to the top experts, so that pathway is different. But the initial diagnosis really is just kind of knowledge and perspective.
Thanks, Mike. And if someone wanted to find out more about your journey or maybe learn about Testicular Cancer Society and the forum, what would they do?
Really just visit our website. So our main website is testicularcancersociety.org. And then the forums are at tc-cancer.com. And there's a tab on there. That whole website, we need to redo both our websites. They're kind of old, but, the forums on the tc-cancer.com are really the most valuable resource on there.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's been a real pleasure.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, Joe.